If you're setting up a server room or even a high-end home office, the biggest worry is that the power you rely on can disappear at any moment, leaving you with data loss, equipment damage, or a sudden halt to whatever you're working on. You don't want a UPS that looks impressive on paper but ends up being a hassle to install, a disappointment when you finally need it, or a money drain that never really pays for itself. That tension between reliability, ease of integration, and cost-effectiveness is why I spent a solid day digging through the specs of the Eaton 4U Rack-Mountable UPS, checking out the few forums that mention it, and comparing the kind of real-world setup most buyers actually have. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about what the Eaton 4900-watt, 5500 VA unit actually brings to the table. It's a 4U, rack-mountable system that can serve both 120V and 208V environments, which means it's flexible enough for most data center rows or a professional-grade home rack. The 9Ah battery means you're looking at roughly 10 minutes of runtime at half-load, a window that is short enough to give you time to orderly shut down, but long enough that you'll actually notice the difference when a brownout hits. For many small to medium businesses, that 10-minute cushion is precisely what you need to avoid corrupted databases or interrupted backup jobs. Who should consider this particular UPS? If your equipment sits in a standard 19-inch rack and you have a moderate power budget, think a couple of servers, a network switch, and maybe a NS, this unit hits the sweet spot. The 6 output connectors are spaced in a way that makes plugging in typical rack mount PDU cables a breeze, and the Ethernet 10/100 port lets you monitor status without pulling out a laptop to read an LCD panel. That remote monitoring is more than a nice-to-have for anyone who runs a server room after hours. It lets you set up email alerts for low battery or overload conditions, so you can react before a problem becomes a crisis. On the flip side, there are clear reasons to walk away. If you run a high-density environment where each rack draws close to a megawatt, the 5500 VA rating will be a limiting factor. Likewise, if you need more than 10 minutes of runtime at full load, the 9Ah battery will be insufficient. You'd need to add external battery modules, which adds both cost and complexity. Finally, the unit's physical size is 4U, so it takes up a full quarter of a typical 19-inch rack. For a tight rack with limited vertical space, you might have to sacrifice another device just to make room for this UPS. Now, let's get into the practical strengths. The input connection is a standard IEC-C13 socket that handles up to 120/208V, which means you can plug it into existing power distribution units without needing a custom-made cable or a dedicated circuit. That kind of plug-and-play simplicity is a real time-saver during installation. The Ethernet interface also works with Eaton's Intelligent Power Manager software, allowing you to set threshold alerts for load, temperature, and battery health. In practice, I've seen IT admins set the load threshold at 80% so that the UPS automatically sheds non-critical loads before it reaches a critical state. That proactive management can keep your most important services running even when the overall power draw spikes unexpectedly. Another practical upside is the dual voltage flexibility. In many older buildings, the mains might be a mix of 120V and 208V circuits. The Eaton unit lets you choose the appropriate input without swapping hardware, which is a huge plus if you ever move the UPS between different racks or even different facilities. The output receptacles are also a mix of IEC-C13 and NEMA 515, giving you a little more versatility than a UPS that only offers one plug type. This makes it easier to power both rack-mount equipment and peripheral devices such as a small UPS-compatible monitor or a test server that you might keep on a bench. Where the rubber meets the road are the practical weaknesses. The battery runtime, as mentioned, caps out at around 10 minutes at half load. If your workload is heavy, that window shrinks dramatically. And because the unit uses a sealed lead-acid battery, you'll need to replace the battery every 3 to 5 years to maintain that runtime. Battery replacement isn't a huge task, but it does mean you'll have a recurring expense that some users might not anticipate when they first see the price tag. Also, the UPS doesn't have a hot swap capability for the batteries, so you'll have to power down the unit to replace them, which can be inconvenient if you're aiming for uninterrupted operations. A subtle but important point is the audible alarm frequency. The unit emits a beeping sound when on battery power, and the tone is higher pitched than many comparable models. In a quiet office environment, that can be a bit jarring, especially if you're using the UPS to protect a conference room setup where people expect a tranquil space. The alarm isn't